sisters and brothers, comrades and friends, if there's one phrase that should be hung round George Osborne's neck like a concrete necklace, it's the phrase that we're all in this together. Income Data Services, as you've already heard, brought out a report that showed over the last 12 months the directors of the top 100 companies in Britain have seen, at the time when overall wages in real terms have declined, a 49% increase in their income. If you take out the chief executive officers and the finance directors of those 100 firms, the actual rise was 66% in their income. Now, that's probably why 98 of the top 100 firms now are locating their head offices outside the British tax regime in foreign climes. But I don't think they feel sorry for chief executive officers, because in the 10 years up to from 1999 to 2009, they saw their income rise from 47 times the average wage to 88 times the average wage on Labour's watch. On Labour's watch, those who are on the biggest companies in this country doubled their income as a proportion of everybody else's wages, which is why, and Peter quoted from it last night, the founder of The Independent had this article about the 1848 revolutionary period in Europe, and buried within that was the point he was making about the richest 10% of the population is now 9 times better off than the poorest. There's an enormous difference between those who run large companies and the average people. At some point, this excessive difference is going to cause trouble. Has that moment come? The second story that I want to refer to in this We're On It Together saga is one of the consequences of that growing gap between rich and the rest. We've been in the University of London Union buildings for the past couple of days, and University College is the buildings around that. There's a professor of epidemiology at that University College who brought out a report on Friday which shows that if the planned rise in retirement age goes on to 68, according to this professor where we've been for the past 2 days, then 2/3 of Britons will fail to reach that planned state retirement age free from life-limiting physical or mental disability. Now, what links those two stories is there is no national major party in this country now that links two stories like that. There isn't a party that sees the growing gap between rich and the rest in class terms, of a society that's getting more and more unequal. There isn't a party that talks for the 99% against that 1%, or the millions against the millionaires. Now, if you're under 30 in this audience, I suspect that it's not much news to you that Labour ain't much different than Tories. You know no different. Those of us who are a week or two older have a different experience. Let me give you one of my experiences from 1984, when halfway through the great miners' strike, we used to have 200,000 miners in this country. With their wives and their children, they were 2% of the British population, and for 12 months from 84 to 85, they took on the state. They took on the capitalist class and the establishment in defence of jobs and living standards. And halfway through that dispute, the then Secretary of State for Social Security, Norman Fowler, the Tory MP for Sutton Coldfield, came into the House of Commons to cut the benefits paid to the families of striking miners, because on strike, strikers didn't get any benefits, but in those days, women and kids got some benefits, and he wanted to cut it by £16 a week. Eric Heffer, then the Labour MP from Liverpool, Terry Fields, myself, and I think 26 other Labour MPs, invaded the pitch in the middle of the House of Commons. I walked over to Norman Fowler, I picked up his speech, I ripped it into tiny shreds, and I threw it down. Grave disorder having arisen. Now, when have you heard that phrase in the last 18 months? With everything that's being done by the Tories and the Liberal Democrats, against working people in this country. When have you heard that sort of anger expressed in the House of Commons that ordinary working people are feeling? Where's the anger that even before the changes in pension schemes, we've already got the lowest participation in pension schemes in this country for 55 years since 1956? Where's the anger that now almost the majority of FE colleges are reporting a decline in applications from 16 to 19-year-olds because of the loss of EMA? That child poverty is fractionally above what it is in Greece. That the competition for apprenticeships at BAE Systems is now running at 4 times the competition to get into Cambridge. Why no anger? Because there's no fundamental difference between the main parties. On the NHS, Labour complains about Tories' £20 billion worth of cuts. They should reread the introduction on the 16th of December 2009 by Sir David Nicholson to the operating framework of the NHS in England, where the 20 billion cuts 6 months before the general election was being brought in by Labour. On pensions, yes, it's a Tory Chancellor at second. Yes, it's a Liberal Democrat Chief Secretary, but they're implementing a report written by a Labour peer, Lord Hutton. There is a tripartite agreement on that working people should suffer in this country. The same could be said, if I had more time, on tuition fees and other issues as well. It's just been mentioned by a bit about previous situations when we had a bit of a battle in this country. In the 1980s, when Thatcher came for local services, we had 20 Labour councils starting a battle against the Tories. Now we disagree with a bit about their tactics, but at the end of that battle, only 2, Lambeth and especially Liverpool, went the distance and took on the Tory government. Today, we couldn't find 20 Labour councillors on Labour authorities who've resisted the Tory cuts. When I looked through the voting figures, I couldn't find 2 Labour councillors in this country that visited. When we tried to organise a debate this weekend on cuts in local authorities, we couldn't find 1 Labour councillor to come and debate with us. That's how far Labour's changed. So, we need to do something about it. As has been said, the Trade Unionists and Socialist Coalition was set up in order to stand candidates at the general election. I have the honour to be the interim chair of that organisation, and we stood in 25 large towns and cities at the general election. This year we stood 160 candidates in the council elections, and we know this is a difficult and long path that we're involved in, but we were proud of those results. Only 5 of our candidates got less than 1%. A quarter got over 5%. 13 candidates got between 10 and 40%. This year, the battles will be different as we move into next year's election. Already the cuts have become concrete, from libraries through to Sure Start centres, from individual redundancies in local authorities, from a wage freeze whilst inflation rockets. And Labour's inaction is getting more and more like the Emperor's new clothes as every day goes by. Their only strategy is wait until 2015 and hope that by inertia they will inherit the government. In Scotland, an important step was taken 2 weeks ago to found a parallel organisation at a meeting sponsored by leading trade unionists from Unison and PCS to stand elections next year when all the Scottish councillors are up under STB. But perhaps alongside the general hundreds of councillors, I think, who will be standing in the May elections throughout England and Wales next year is the important area of London. A motion was passed in July by the RMT, which has now been backed by the FBU and other leading union activists in the city, to bring together an anti-cuts list in the Greater London Assembly elections, and now that is being endorsed most recently by striking electricians down at Blackfriars. If you're from London and in the area, in a union, please help sponsor that campaign. To finish, Chair, unlike some of others on the left, we don't sow false hope. We know how difficult things are under a first-past-the-post system. We know how difficult it is with publicity, although we get it well with the Jarrow march. As soon as the election period starts, then the main 3 parties are the main beneficiaries of that. We've got to find ways around that, and I think this is worth just for 30 seconds reporting. When the Gaza flotilla was stopped on Friday, I sent out a message on Twitter about how to protest to the Israeli embassy. 4 people alone. Laurie Penny from the New Statesman, Owen Jones, who was here at the weekend, the author of Chavs, John MacDonald, MP, and Mark Thomas, the comedian, sent out, old-fashioned alternative comedian, as he likes to be known, sent out that message of how to protest with a link to the CWI website for further information about Paul Murphy and the rest to over 100,000 people. Yesterday, yesterday, we were honoured not just with a Jarrah March, but with a 106-year-old woman, Hetty Bauer, who was here in London in 1936 for the first Jarrah March, welcoming and walking all the way from the embankment to Trafalgar Square with this generation of Jarrah Marchers. I sent out that photo. This is one of my favourites. That was retweeted by one person to 97,000, and that was Mark Gatiss, League of Gentlemen and the scriptwriter from Doctor Who and Sherlock. And perhaps the biggest one was when the Jarrah March entered London. Stephen Fry from Brisbane in Australia sent out a message of support to Jarrah March 11 to 3.3 million people. Now, I only make that point to say we will find ways around the problems that we have with publicity. None of that is a substitute for the detailed discussions you have to have with people and get them involved. The work you have to do alongside people to convince them both of your ideas and the organisation you want to get them involved. But the point we're trying to end with, and Hannah will explain this in more detail in her contribution as well, is that if Labour councillors are unwilling or unable to come here to socialism to debate ideas of how to resist the Tories with us, we will take that debate to them in every town and city in the country next May when trade unionists, socialists and anti-cuts campaigners come together under the umbrella of the Tusk in order to challenge at the electoral election box the cut strategies or the inaction of Labour itself. Get yourself involved with that, and no doubt the speakers will finish the rally with. What we need to do within that formation is make sure there's a strong socialist current embedded deep within that anti-cuts campaign electoral strategy. The best way to do that is to join the Socialist Party.